$318 million. That is how much it costs to make the most powerful nation on earth irrelevant.
$318 million. That is how much it costs to make the most powerful nation on earth irrelevant. Not a war, not a sanctions package, not a diplomatic crisis that takes decades to untangle. An infrastructure project, ports, rail lines, Arctic shipping lanes, a digital customs network that clears Canadian goods for European and Asian markets before they ever leave Canadian soil. $318 million. And every single dollar is pointed in one direction, away from the United States of America. Donald Trump threatened Canada with new tariffs. He ordered border agents to slow every truck crossing into the United States to a crawl. Thousands of rigs backed up for miles. Perishable goods rotting in refrigerated trailers. Auto parts delayed. Pharmaceutical supplies stuck in transit. American factories idled. American workers sent home. And instead of retaliating, instead of counter-tariffs or angry press conferences, Mark Carney walked to a podium in Halifax, stood in front of a window where construction cranes were already visible behind him, and announced the Canadian Trade Independence Corridor. Warren Buffett called it the smartest infrastructure investment he has seen from any government in a decade. Then he explained why it signals something far more dangerous for the American economy than any tariff Canada could ever impose. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly what triggered this, what each component of the bypass actually builds, what Buffett says about the permanence of rerouted supply chains, why Washington is quietly terrified. Let me fill you in on what triggered this. The trade tensions between the United States and Canada have been escalating for months. But Trump's latest move crossed a line that Carney's government had been quietly preparing for. Trump announced new tariff threats targeting Canadian manufactured goods, agricultural products, and processed resources. That alone was damaging, but familiar. Every time Carney says no to a demand, Trump reaches for the tariff lever. It is the only tool he seems to know how to use. But this time he added something sneakier, and in many ways far more destructive. U.S. Customs and Border Protection began implementing enhanced inspection protocols at every major border crossing. Detroit, Windsor, Buffalo, Niagara, Blaine, Surrey, Port Huron, Champlain. Every major artery connecting the two economies was suddenly, simultaneously congested. Wait times at the Ambassador Bridge, the single busiest commercial crossing in North America, went from an average of 30 minutes to over 4 hours. Overnight, the new protocols were announced exactly 48 hours after Carney publicly rejected Trump's latest demands on dairy market access and critical mineral export terms. The retaliation was obvious to anyone paying attention. This is bureaucratic war. You not need legislation. You do not need congressional approval. You just tell customs agents to take a little longer with every truck, open more containers, request additional documentation, and suddenly the most efficient border in the world becomes a parking lot. The damage was immediate. It hit both sides. Canadian exporters lost an estimated $47 million per week. But here is what Trump either did not anticipate or did not care about. American businesses were getting destroyed too. The U.S.-Canada supply chain is not one-directional. It is an integrated system. Auto parts manufactured in Ontario feed assembly plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. Canadian pharmaceutical ingredients supply American hospitals. Canadian lumber and agricultural products stock American hardware stores and grocery chains. 40% of what Michigan's auto assembly plants need comes from Canada. Slow the border, and you slow Detroit. You idle production lines. You send American workers home without pay because the parts they need are sitting in a truck 2 miles from the factory going nowhere. Let me show you the receipts. A Ford plant in Flat Rock, Michigan sent 1,400 workers home on a Tuesday afternoon because steering column assemblies from Brampton, Ontario were stuck at the Ambassador Bridge, 11 miles from the factory. A children's hospital in Buffalo ran dangerously low on a pharmaceutical compound manufactured in Montreal. A compound with a 72-hour shelf life sitting in a refrigerated trailer at the Peace Bridge, ticking toward expiration. The Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association tracked 312 separate supply chain disruptions in 2 weeks. American companies filed 847 delay-related insurance claims. The Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce estimated the local economy was losing $8.3 million per day. A single automobile, assembled in Michigan, crosses the border an average of 7 times during production. Slow the border, and you do not just delay Canadian exports. You break the rhythm of American manufacturing itself. If this story is connecting dots you have not seen assembled anywhere else, hit subscribe right now. Here is the part nobody expected. Carney received a briefing showing sustained border slowdowns would cost Canadian industry $2.4 billion annually. His response, according to 2 aides in the room, was a single sentence: "Then we stop sending goods through their border." That sentence is the moment the bypass project was born. Within 2 weeks, he announced the Canadian Trade Independence Corridor. $318 million. 4 components, and a timeline that made Washington's head spin. He held the press conference in Halifax, not Ottawa. That detail matters. He was standing at the port. Behind him, construction equipment was already positioned. Cranes, excavators, survey markers in the ground. He did not announce a study or a committee. He announced a project already breaking ground, flanked by the premiers of 4 provinces and 3 political parties. Complete unity. Component 1. $127 million for the Atlantic Gateway Port expansion. Deep water berths in Halifax and St. John, capable of handling the largest cargo vessels on the planet. Automated cargo handling and direct shipping lane agreements already negotiated with Rotterdam, Hamburg, Liverpool, Mumbai, and Singapore. Not proposed, already done. Canada currently ships 75% of its exports through the United States. The target is under 50% within 3 years. Halifax sits on one of the deepest ice-free harbors in North America. Ships that cannot fit into many American East Coast ports can dock there without dredging. Nature gave Halifax the harbor. Carney is giving it the infrastructure. Maersk MSC and CMA CGM are already in preliminary discussions about expanding port calls. Component 2, $88 million for a northern rail corridor connecting Ontario and Quebec manufacturing directly to Atlantic ports. Instead of a truck in a 4-hour borderline, a container goes on a train in Toronto and arrives at Halifax 18 hours later. No border, no customs delay, no Trump. Rail is 4 times more fuel efficient than trucking, letting Canada market its exports through one of the cleanest logistics chains in the world. The 18 months to full capacity. Component 3, $52 million for Arctic shipping infrastructure at the port of Churchill in Manitoba. As northern sea routes open longer each year, Churchill becomes strategically brilliant. The shipping distance to northern Europe is actually shorter than from Halifax. Canada owns every mile of the Northwest Passage. This is Carney's long game, 3 to 5 years to full capacity. But it positions Canada for a shipping revolution already beginning. Component 4, $31 million, the smallest line item, arguably the most consequential. A digital customs pre-clearance network with the EU, UK, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. Canadian goods cleared electronically before they leave port. 80% reduction in processing time. Real-time tracking. Automated compliance verification. I want you to sit with this comparison. Trump is making trade with Canada slower, more expensive, and less reliable. Carney is making trade with everyone else faster, cheaper, and more efficient. The digital platform does not just match what the US border used to offer. It is better than anything the United States currently provides. This component does not just bypass American infrastructure, bypasses American relevance. Total cost, $318 million. That is what the United States spends on military operations in about 36 hours. For Canada's economy, it is pocket change. And what it buys is permanent independence from American trade choke points. Carney's quote was measured but devastating. Quote, Canada will trade with the world. We prefer to trade with our neighbor, but we will not be held captive by our neighbor's politics. He is not fighting Trump. He is making Trump irrelevant. Fighting means you still need your opponent. Building around them means you do not. Drop a like on this video. It tells the algorithm this kind of deep analysis matters and helps it reach the people who need to hear it. Then Warren Buffett weighed in, and what he said should alarm every American who understands supply chain economics. Quote, the most expensive thing in business is a single point of failure. For decades, Canada's single point of failure has been the American border. What Mr. Carney just did is eliminate that single point of failure for $318 million. That is not spending. That is the cheapest insurance policy in the history of international trade. Quote, I have seen supply chains rerouted exactly 4 times on a national scale. Every single time the reroute became permanent. Goods do not come back once they find a better path. Supply chains are like water. They find the path of least resistance. And Mr. Carney just built a path with less resistance than the American border. Drawing on his ownership of BNSF Railway, Buffett explained the permanence factor. Quote, "Rail infrastructure creates structural stickiness. Once goods move along a route, the entire supporting ecosystem builds around it. Warehouses, distribution centers, labor pools. The route becomes entrenched. Within 5 years, reversing it would cost 10 times what building it cost. This is a one-way door." On the border slowdowns, he was brutal. Quote, "The enhanced inspection protocols are the dumbest strategic move I have seen from any government in my lifetime. It is like a restaurant deliberately giving its best customer food poisoning, and then wondering why they started eating somewhere else. And then the line, circulating through every boardroom since." Quote, "America has been the center of North American trade for 100 years, not because of military power, because of infrastructure. Canada is now building all of those things, and in some cases, building them better. Leverage disappears. The moment your partner builds a door you do not control. Canada just built the door." Washington's reaction reveals exactly who understands and who does not. Trump dismissed it. His economists told him it was not a bluff. He waved them off. One senior trade advisor told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "If they actually build this, it fundamentally changes the math of every future trade negotiation we have with Canada." Border state senators grasped it immediately. A Republican senator said, quote, "We have been assuming Canada has no choice but to trade through us. That assumption just got a $318 million price tag attached to proving it wrong." A customs brokerage in Buffalo saw volume drop 38%, not because trade stopped, because Canadian companies were already finding alternatives. The mayor of a Michigan border town told the Detroit Free Press, quote, "We have been the gateway between two countries for 100 years. Now they are building a bypass, and we are about to become a dead end. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening." This does not get told in 3-minute cable news segments. The ripple effects extend globally. Mexico has requested briefings on the CTX design. EU officials praised it as a model for trade resilience. Japan, South Korea, and Australia are assessing similar investments. Canada just wrote the playbook for how a mid-sized economy bypasses a superpower's trade leverage. And every threatened country is reading it. The CTEE is not just a Canadian infrastructure project. It is a template, and templates, once they exist, get used. Every container that goes to Halifax, instead of through a U.S. port, is a transaction that bypasses the American financial system entirely. Every new shipping lane that does not touch American soil is another thread pulled from the fabric of dollar dominance. The cruelest irony: Canada is building infrastructure for the next 30 years of global trade. America cannot even repair the Ambassador Bridge. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives us infrastructure, a C-. Over 46,000 bridges are structurally deficient. One country is building the future. The other cannot maintain the past. Where does this end? 3 scenarios. Scenario 1. Washington reverses course, restores normal border operations, negotiates genuinely. The CTEET still gets built, but functions as diversification, not replacement. Least likely. White House does not admit errors. Scenario 2. The slow bleed. Border disruptions continue intermittently. Trade migrates gradually. 75% through America becomes 60, then 50, then 40. American border towns hollow out, the most likely near-term outcome. Scenario 3, the one I believe we are heading toward: structural realignment. The CEE catalyzes a global reconfiguration. Mexico builds its own bypass. The EU formalizes alternatives. The world does not stop trading with America. It stops needing to trade through America. And the difference between being a partner and being a gatekeeper is the difference between relevance and decline. America built its power as the gatekeeper. The gates are being built elsewhere now. Every empire that ever declined believed it was irreplaceable, that the trade routes would always run through its territory, that the ships would always dock at its ports, that the world would always need its currency. Every single one was wrong, not because a rival conquered them, but because the world found a way around them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. This story is accelerating, and we will be here for every turn. The bypass is how empires end, not with a bang, but a new shipping lane. Trump tried to use the border as a weapon. Carney just built a door, and doors once opened do not close.